out there, and welcome back to another episode of My Grocery Adventure. It is my pleasure to have you back once again. If you're listening only, do know that you could see our faces on the YouTube channel. There's a video version as well. This episode, we are joined for the first time by Clint and Jenny Osner of Hired Man's Grocery and Grill in Conway Springs, Kansas. So they have been running their store for quite a while, like 10, 15 years? 15? Does that sound right? 15, yeah. So been in it quite a while. And, are one of the few grocers that I've met that I believe stepped into the business without necessarily kind of inheriting their way into the business, like being brought up under other people whose dad's dad was a grocer. And so that's just kind of what their family does. You find a lot of that in the grocery world, and you guys aren't that way. And so I thought it would be really fun to see, why does one make a choice like that to open the grocery store? But we'll get into all of that as we walk through the story together. For now, I'd like to welcome Clint and Jenny. Thank you so much for making the time to come and talk to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure to have you guys here. So let's dive in with kind of going to the beginning of, where did you each grow up? And just give us a little bit of a picture of what your growing up experience was like. Whoever would like to go first, you guys can.
You're older. It's your story first.
I thought the ladies always first. Well, Conway Springs from, a baby on. So that's how it kind of went for me. I just was a normal kid, I guess. And then as I grew up, this whole story kind of goes towards this point. I would go to my neighbor's house, which was my uncle, and I'd be ready to go to the farm every morning. And we would go. I was probably not much help at second, third grade, but I still wanted to go. And my dad had another job. He helped farm too when he got off his first job. Well, I would meet at Albert's house. I'd be in his truck ready to go at like 6:30 in the morning, and we'd go to the farm. And I spent a lot of my summers going out there as a kid. And besides that, yeah, I did a lot of that. I don't know. What else do I need to tell you? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, that's a great little overview. One thing that I've asked every guest is, how many kids were in your graduating high school class?
I think around 40.
40. Okay. Yeah, that's a cool ballpark, because it varies so much, and it's not always what you would expect. Thank you, Clint, for starting us off. Way to go first. Jenny, what about you?
So I was born and raised in Conway Springs as well. So Clint's a year older than me in high school. And so we've always gone to the same schools, but our parents were friends. So there were times that I remember that their family would come over and play for a while, or we would go over there. And that was just normal. You had a lot of different play dates at that time. Different families would come over. We're both from families of 6. So he had 6 in his family. I had 6 in my family. I'm the oldest. He's a middle child. And so some of that was you just always knew of almost everybody in town. And so we just always have known each other, I guess. And then it wasn't until I was a senior in high school and he was just leaving high school that we ended up starting to date. So then we got married, 3 kids. That's our story.
That's our story in a nutshell. So you knew each other like your whole lives. And were there feelings before senior year? Can I ask that? Or was it like a brand new revelation all of a sudden?
I just always knew him. I wouldn't say yeah.
We all kind of hung out together.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It probably wasn't until later. Yeah. I would say later.
That's wild. I appreciate the experience, because I have so few people in my life from like that long of a history together. So I just think that's kind of cool. So what about after high school? What kinds of education or jobs, or what did you pursue once you were free into the world?
I'm going again.
You're first. You're the class of 95.
He's nominated you, buddy. You're on deck.
So, of course, as a senior in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I had no clue. So I went to Pratt Community College. I was going to do machining and welding, and they had a degree for a 2 year degree there that I could do. And I went there for 1 year. After 1 year, they decided it wasn't quite over yet, but towards the end of the year, they said, we're discontinuing manufacturing technology. And then us kids that were doing it was like, what? You know, you think they would have let us go on through, but they said we were going to have to go to, they had a couple colleges we could pick from and go on. Uh, I was going to have to take because the classes didn't transfer very well. So I was either going to have to take almost 2 years again at another 2 year college that I already took a year. And as a kid, I thought that wasn't the greatest thing for me to do. So I don't know if it was the smartest thing of me to do, but I went and said, heck with this. And I went to work. So I got a job at Youngers and Sons, which is a machining and they do a little welding just about 15 minutes from us. It's a good company. So I went and worked for them for about a year. And then in the meantime, I wanted to learn how to TIG weld because I knew there was good money in TIG welding.
Mhm.
So there was a guy here in Conway that let me use he had all this stuff in his garage and he did some work out of it. So I learned how to weld from him and a few other people. And then they got me on at Cessna. Uh, and once I was at Cessna, I stayed there for 14 years. And then at about 10 years is when the store started. So I had to work, I think it was 10 or 11 years, wasn't it? I think 10, I think it was 10 years. And then uh, I worked both jobs for 3 to 4 years to make sure the store was going to make it because I had a really good job at Cessna. They paid well. It was just a good job. So
Yeah.
now we're at where we're at.
Yeah. And what kind of company is Cessna? Is that like
Uh,
airplanes?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
a, yeah,
That
they
was what
do.
I thought, but I was like, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
how old were you when you started working there then? Would that be
At
like,
Cessna
uh-huh.
or Cessna, I was 20. I
Okay.
remember that because I couldn't start my retirement until I was 21.
Oh,
And so I was like, well, and yeah, we weren't married. We were just dating at that time. So I was already thinking about wanting to put into retirement. And they're like, no, you got to wait until you're 21 at that time. So
interesting.
yeah,
Okay. Okay. And what about you, Jenny?
So when I graduated, I went to Wichita State University and I ended up getting a 4 year degree in education and a middle level English endorsement so I could teach kindergarten through ninth grade. And then, right, the last well, we got married in 99 and I graduated college in 2000. So it's hard to believe that I was married for a year of college, but he was working full time at Cessna already by then. And so he had bought a house. And so we were established. And so just getting married was the next step. So we ended up getting married. And then I went to school for another year and finished. And then I was looking for a job. And I got lucky enough that the Conway Springs district had an opening and I interviewed with them first, but I had some interviews in other districts, and they, I, when they found out that I had interviews at other districts, they called that night and said, would you please cancel yours, or consider waiting? And I told them, no, not waiting. You'll either offer me the job and I will accept it, or I'm going to go interview because I can't turn down something if I need to. And so they offered me a position and I started teaching middle school. Through the years, I taught for 18 years for the Conway Springs district. Most of my career I spent in third grade. That's probably where my passion is, that grade level. I also taught a little bit of high school English, freshman English. So I've kind of had the ability to teach in all three buildings, which is really a neat aspect for it. And it was really good because it was a good family job that I could do my job, stay in town, and then pick up the kids and come home and be a mom here at home. And we talked about going to other districts, but my heart was already here, and these are our kids and our neighbors and our friends. And it was a very good district to work for. So I was very happy to stay in Conway and to get to know everybody. So that was really good. Our kids came later. Yeah, probably I worked for a couple years, and then our kids came later. So we were married about a year or two before Carly came along. So we were young. We were young, but it was good. It was
Harley
good.
is your daughter's name?
Yep, that's our
Oh,
oldest.
I did
Yeah,
not know
yep,
that.
yep.
Precious.
Spelled a little different than yours, but yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
there's all kinds of spellings I've seen. It's wild. You can really get creative with it. Um, I have so many questions. I think the first one that's popping into my head is why is third grade your passion? Like you said, you got to work in all three buildings, like across age ranges. Like, what is it about third grade that's so magical?
So I like language arts, but in third grade, they kind of say sometimes is the odd numbered years in education is the big step for kids. It's a lot of new concepts that are thrown in those age levels. And so in third grade, I always told them third grade's the best grade you're ever going to have in elementary school. That's what I always told them. But I mean, we get to learn cursive handwriting. We get to learn how to multiply and divide. So we go from being younger kids from reading short stories to get to read novels and talk about novels. And so it's a chance for us to step up a little bit and to be big kids, and go from being little kids to bigger kids. And they still like you, and it's still okay to say that they like you, and it's still okay to do fun things and have art projects and cut and paste. And so that's probably because you get to do a little bit of everything. We were able to teach a lot of like science. I was able to do a lot of science things. Um, One of the things I taught was government at a very basic level in third grade. So we got to talk about the history of Conway Springs. We'd always do tours of what things were like. We'd talk about goods and services, which was really cool because none of that I ever thought was going to be in my future. We would tour, local dairies. We would tour farmers' fields and how they would grow crops. We'd tour the local co-op and see the different jobs that were out there because at a smaller level at third grade, they only have a handful of jobs that they knew about. So we were trying to show them that the world was bigger. There's other jobs out there that just because you're not exposed to them in our small town doesn't mean that there might not be something different for you out there, and different's okay. And so at a smaller scale, we were trying to introduce them to the world. And it was able I really love to teach the history of Conway Springs. So we'd walk around town and we'd look at where like the jail was, and we'd talk about, did you know Conway Springs had a jail? And of course they wanted to know if people were locked up, there, and different things, and why people would come, and how we had healthy water and springs, and people thought they would come here because our water was in a sense magical. So a lot of them came from Colorado, where they had a lot of respiratory diseases, and it was because it was just so wet there, and Kansas is flat and dry and hot and humid. And so really it was our hot weather, that helped those respiratory ailments for people. But they would come and bathe in our water and drink our water, and for a while, they thought there was a magic cure to the water here. So at a third grade level, you could put that appeal to them, like we live in a community that they thought was magic, but it wasn't really magic. It was really science. And then you could tie all that into it. So that was really neat to see the connection between the history of Conway. Then you talk about the history of Kansas, and then you go on and talk about, the history of the United States at a smaller level. I mean, we're talking 8 and 9 year olds, but enough to expose them at our small level to how we interact into a larger level. So it's fun.
Dude, that is so amazing. Like, I've never thought about any of that. How old? I don't have kids and I can't remember off the top of my head. Like, how old are third graders? Like 7, 8?
Eight. Usually their eighth or ninth birthday.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That's so cool. You seem like such a born teacher. Like that just
Mhm.
it I wonder, like when you were a kid, did you always know you wanted to be a teacher or
Oh, we had school. I'm the oldest of six, so I kind of have a bossy trait to me. You ask any of my siblings. We're stair step, the four of us oldest girls, and literally 11 months, 11 months. We're stair step, so we literally were back to back in school. But we played school growing up, and I was always the teacher or the boss, and I was always telling them what to do because, of course, my ideas were always the best ideas. But it was,
Oops.
kind of natural, to go through. I think it was just the older trait, quality. And then it allowed me to, I had a passion for aquatics. So I taught lifeguarding and swimming lessons. And so I ran the swimming pool here in Conway Springs for years. And the pool was supposed to close. And so we did a fundraiser to replace our piping and to put in a slide because kids in rural communities need places to go. They need those outs. And so I spent a lot of summers at the swimming pool teaching swimming lessons and lifeguarding and managing the swimming pool, and all of that I think just kind of came naturally. And I was able to do it with my kids. It was always about kids first.
Yeah.
We'll get to that with the store. That was kind of an agreement too, but
Oh gosh, that's just wild to me. I'm the oldest of four. We played school. I was always the teacher. They always called me bossy, and I taught swimming lessons. Like, what are the chances? When you grow up in a small town, there's only so many places you can stretch your legs of like wanting to teach and share information, and swimming lessons was a natural. But yeah, wow. Okay. So I think that's a really great spot then to like you both grew up in Conway Springs and then chose as adults to stay slash come back and be there. And like, it seems like you're real well established there. Like maybe that's going to be for the duration where you are. What is it? I know it's magical with the water, and I could totally see where you're going with that. But like, yeah, what else is it about Conway Springs that is such a this is we don't want anything else.
hands down. People. It's our people. These are our people. That's my without I don't know if that's your response too, but
Oh,
our families here, I mean, we're both from very large families. So Christmas on either side we go, there's for sure a hundred plus people that are there. We're just both from very large families, and a majority of them are right here. But not only our families, but our friends, the people we grew up with. So for me, it's the people. I mean, we truly feel, I love it meeting, the older population that comes in, and helping them out. And we're there when people celebrate and we have all of our weddings, but we're also there for the heartaches when we lose people in our community as well, and we're there as well. But that's part of being in this place, and we all look out for each other.
Mm.
Now, you're what do you always tell the kids?
We know all, hear all, and see all.
That's
So
right.
when they were doing something, obviously in a small town, most people know how this is, but especially in the store, I see people all day long.
Right.
So the kids would do something, and
Little,
yeah, it
that
wouldn't be major. I mean, but I would say, I heard this that you did today, and they're like, how do you even know before we even did it? And that's what I always say. We know all, hear all, and see all. And I would never tell them who told me because I'm not ratting out
Absolutely. Right. uh what would you add to the or would you say anything different about?
pretty much the same as she said. Like she said, both of our families are big, and I think every one of them, well, all but I think one of all of our brothers and sisters live here in Conway.
Oh wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's a big thing. I mean, we have our family, and that's kind of where the store will come into it. Our family is the one, like my brothers and uncles and everybody help build the store. So that's probably down the road in the conversation. But yeah, so and then the people, of course. Yeah, what she said was just right on.
Popped right out. It was
I
perfect.
usually don't have to talk. She's a way better talker than I am, and I usually let her do most of the talking.
Hey, whatever works for you, man. Division, divide and conquer. That's what I mean. um Okay, so yeah, so it sounds like it was kind of a no-brainer that Conway Springs is our home. This is where we want to be. So that part feels like that foundation's really well established. But then how do you work at Cessna for 10 years and then decide, or how long, before that, were you thinking about, I should open a grocery store? Like, where does that even start to pop into your mind?
Well, uh, I guess I didn't really love the job, but I wasn't like I don't know how to say. I guess I didn't love doing it because you sit in a booth and you weld. Nothing bad about Cessna. That's just how it is. I mean,
Mhm.
you go, they pay you well. You sit in a cubicle. You're supposed to weld for 8 or 10 hours a day, and get production done. That's what it's about. And me, at the beginning, it was fun because I was learning a new trait. I was getting better every day, or every week, whatever. So after some years went by, you're only going to get as good as you're going to get. I mean, in my opinion, I was as good as I could get. I welded so much, and it started to get boring and sitting in there and just having to do it. It's super hot. I mean, people do it, still do it, but I think they have air conditioning a bit now. So I just told Jenny, I didn't really like it. Um, and then that's part of her story where I'll let her tell you that. But I was at the car wash one day, and this older lady from the community, very well known, we were just talking a little bit, and she said something about a grocery store, and I said, "Well, we're thinking about building a grocery store." But the other store had closed already. It closed for about a year. Um, so she said, "Why don't you quit thinking about it and do it?" So I went home and told Jenny, and then she's like, "Are you really serious?" So there was a lot north side of Conway with just tall grass. I mean, we did look at the store on Main Street, but that also might be down the road in this conversation. But we did look at the old store. It needed a lot of work. And when we went to our warehouse, they said it was too small for what we needed to do. So this place with all the weeds and grass, I seen if we could purchase it, and that's probably later in the story. But Jenny's part is another reason when I came and said about building the grocery store, and how I hated Cessna. That's a little bit of her story.
So he would come home a lot and it would be hot, I'd pick up the kids from school and we would get home, and then Clint would be home just a little bit after us. And so it was family time, but he'd come in and he would be hot and sweaty, and I would be cooking supper and he'd have to go take a shower just because he was too hot and sweaty really to play with the kids. And it got to the point that he just really wasn't enjoying it. And we know that life isn't always about enjoying every single aspect of the day, but he would say things like, "I just don't look forward to the next day. Not that I'm against you and the family, not that any of that." He's like, "It just seems like I go to work all the time and I come home and I have a short amount of time with the family, and then to turn around and to spend most of my time doing stuff that I don't like to do."
Yeah.
And that's probably what hit home. We don't talk about it a lot, but I lost my dad at 50 years old to cancer. And there are 6 of us in the family. And we had 2 weeks from the day of his diagnosis to when he died. And it left my mom at home with my younger brother and sister, who was 16 and in 6th grade. So that was kind of a struggle. But my dad was very ambitious on working in aircraft, and he worked on the Boeing side, and he actually was able to work on Air Force One, and he'd always come home, and say that he was able to do things like that because he worked on the military side of Boeing, but he could never talk about it because it was, part of his job and his career. And he always went and worked aircraft because it provided well for our family of 6. But he didn't really enjoy everything he did either. And he always said he was retiring early. He was going to be a hobby farmer. We had a little bit of farmland that they purchased when I was about 16 years old. And his job was to work hard enough to make enough money that he could retire and then finally do the things he wanted to do. Like he wanted to hobby farm. He wanted to have a small amount of hay that he did. He wanted to have cattle. And because he died at 50, all those things that he had wanted to do, he wasn't able to do. Because of the sacrifice he made for his family first, so that he was able to enjoy that in retirement. And unfortunately, he didn't make it. And so, honestly, I don't know. Had we not experienced such of a loss like that, when Clint came home and said things like he wasn't as happy at his job, I probably would have given him a little tough love and said, like, "Buck it up, you're making good money, you can do it," or try to find another job, maybe, that pays like that. But I think I realized because of that, life isn't just about how much money you can make. You have to be able to provide for your family. But if you're not happy, then what can I do to support you? Because I'm happy. I was loving my job. I was loving the kids at home, and
Right.
it made me really sad to think that he was going to work every day and
And
hating what he did. And I was lucky enough to love what I did. So I told him, "Come up with an idea and, pitch it for me and I'll listen." And then he comes home from the car wash and says, "Let's open a grocery store." And I remember thinking, "Are you serious?
like, wait,
We
what?
have 3 kids under the age of 5 and you want to build a grocery store? Like, this is not in our 10-year plan."
We were like 30, weren't we?
28 and 29 at that point. Yeah. We hadn't even hit our 30s yet. So,
Wow. It sounds like the 10-year plan was about to get rewritten.
mhm.
Um, so was that the first time you'd heard about it? The grocery store idea? The
He
car?
might, I mean, he had pitched the idea every once in a while, like maybe we should open the store or maybe I should go work here. He was always pitching different ideas of realistic ideas of what he could do. I think sometimes he would just throw things out just to kind of see my reaction to it or what I maybe had thought about it, in different things. And I just thought it was another idea, like, okay, maybe we can open a grocery store. Yep. All right. We'll open that wasn't a realistic goal to me at first until I realized he was truly serious. And then I said, if this is what you want to do, then we need to look into it and gather information and see if we can make this a reality, see if we can pull it off. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. We're not going to do it, halfway. We're either all in or not in at all. So
Yeah.
but that was probably the push. Mary Kay Hunt, yeah, she was for sure the push that really made the thought really turn into ambition. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, stop thinking about it, start doing it. So where did the idea come from then? Like originally? How did it get in the mix of like all the things you were tossing at her? Why that one out of all the other things?
Well, my dad. So I used to say when we first opened 15 years ago, 20 years ago, for 20 or 25 years, my dad was in the grocery store on Main Street. My dad was a worker. I mean, he's put good working ethics or whatever into all of us kids because when we were young, he had about four jobs. I mean, he was a mailman. So he went and rural route carried. He would go to the store and butcher like they used to butcher with swinging beef. He would do that before. He'd get up at like 4 in the morning, go do that, go to the post office. He farmed and he has some farm ground. His three brothers, or grandpa was around then, but they were all pretty good sized farmers. Um, so he did the farming. He had rentals. So he was always busy, busy. But when we were kids, we would get, it was called Joe's Market. And Joe just recently passed away, probably I would guess a year ago. And he was such a good man. I mean, we would go up there we'd go to church on Saturday night usually. And after church, we'd have to go to the store to clean the meat case because in the olden days, they had the meat case where all the tubs of meat and the trays were in there, and you would scoop it out for people. So we had to take all that out of take the tubs out and take this, I don't know, mat that's in there, take it out and clean it in Clorox water, stuff like that. Well, us as little kids, we got to go play hide and seek behind the toilet paper and bounty paper towels, and they would hide it. Our brothers, would hide us, and we'd get to play in the store. And while Dad was actually working, probably with my older brother, doing that. Well, Joe would come in and he'd be like, "Go get you a Reese's peanut butter cup and a Pepsi," because my dad would never let us have anything unless Joe okayed it, or if he obviously went up and paid for it, and he was not going to just go pay for us all a Reese's peanut butter and a Pepsi or whatever, a soda he called it back then. So we were kind of grown up. We'd get up before school. If it snowed, dad would say, "Let's go." And whoever came, we'd go scoop off the snow off of the concrete. It's not a huge one. I mean, it was only, you parked right up in front of the store, like on Main Street at those days, and you just had to scoop the whole width of the store off. And then we got to go over to the restaurant, and Joe would take us out to eat at Kelly's. It was called Biscuits and Gravy or whatever you wanted. So
For
we were
scooping the
kind
snow.
of in,
He
what's
bought you
that?
he bought you the breakfast for scooping the
Oh
snow.
yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
that's what we kind of got. And he was generous. He would even give us, $5 or $10, which back then, we thought that was a lot. I mean, for just a little bit of scooping, we got breakfast. That was good enough. But he was a super good man. He did a well job in the grocery business, and then he sold it in like '89 or so, and asked my dad if he wanted to buy it. My dad said, "I already have these other 3 or 4 jobs." Um, he's working from so many hours a day that he just said, "I don't think we want to do that, even though dad was doing more than butcher, and he was helping him in the store too. Mom would run the register and help in the butcher room, so they were always helping each other out there too.
Yeah.
So now, I don't know. That's
So you had a little bit of exposure to
yeah,
grocery. That's probably where the thought came from. I would have never thought of it. It wasn't in my background.
Yeah. Did your
when
dad
I
say something, or do you think just from the
when
memories from
my
childhood?
dad, and my dad said when I told him, "Do you know that's a lot of work?" Well, uh,
It is long. Yeah.
I was 28 or 9, and work is not. I'm not afraid of work. I mean, I could tell you lots of stories, but I'm not going to bore you about that. So Isaac, I'm not worried about the work. I'm just saying, could you help me? Because we've butchered our own beef, hogs, deer, all ourselves. We've always done it ourselves. My dad had a little butcher shop, not for people, but for ourselves. It was just a little
Mm-hmm.
shed, and all we did in there was process meat. So we'd always do it out on the farm, bring them in, process them. So we've done it our whole life. So I told him, can you help me in the meat department? I know how to do a lot of things, but I don't know how to do retail side of it. I mean, and he told me then, it's a lot of work, but I said, I just need a month or two of you being there. Well, he's 76 now, and he's still at the store almost every day that we're there. Today is our day off, Thursday. So he's not there. He chooses not to show up on Thursday. But yeah, mom also is there every day, just you know, to help us out.
Yeah.
So I think they enjoy it. I mean, sometimes they don't enjoy it because we're working, and I mean working long hours, and they're tired. But most generally, they get to talk to people, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's in their blood.
Well, and people of that generation, like, I just feel like the people that I know, they don't want to just go home and sit. That's like not even a little bit what they want. So they need something to do. And yeah, my mom, same thing. She's in there almost every day. Um, gosh, okay. So seeing it in your childhood made you think like, yeah, maybe you could be Joe and give some kids a Reese's peanut butter cup and a
Right?
Pepsi.
He does.
Kind of fun.
He does.
Yeah.
Jenny may do it a little more than I do because that's how, if you know my name, and of course the kids know, they know Jenny. So if they've already gotten her, I usually try to pick a different group of kids.
Uh-huh.
But some kids learn the tricks and they know us both.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Um, okay, so then you already had it in your mind. It's one of the ideas that are in the mix. And then the lady at the car wash says, quit thinking about it and start doing it. And when she said that, like, what did that feel like for you to hear her say that?
It was like, man, I mean, kind of like serious. Like, I better start really thinking about this because it was kind of just playing around in our heads. I mean, my head mainly. And like I said, I mentioned it to her, but I don't know. She was a respectful lady. I mean, yeah,
And she had business knowledge.
yeah.
So I think that we were scared like, is this a dream or is this a reality? And it was
Mm-hmm.
almost like she was saying, I think it's going to work. I've been here long enough. I'm in the business world. I think it's going to work. Quit thinking about it. Do it. You're not going to go anywhere by not doing it. So I think some of that was reformation. It gave you more, I don't want to say confidence, but more of a realistic goal. Like maybe we
Mm-hmm.
really can pull it off.
Mm-hmm. Like that idea just shot to the top of the pile. Like,
Oh, for sure. Then he continued to talk about it all the time.
yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So now I feel like, okay, so where do we go from here then? Like Jenny was saying, if this is really what you want to do, let's find some info. Let's figure out what do we need. So, where do you even start then, as far as like, yeah, so
I
what do
took
you do?
I took a real baby step at first, and I talked to Joe because
Oh, yeah.
you know I wanted to. Dad actually said you might ask Joe if you're really serious on a supplier because suppliers at that time were difficult to come by, or a good supplier that was gonna get you what you needed. So I actually called Joe and told him what my plan was, and he was like, well, if I was doing it, I probably wouldn't do a grocery store. I would do a convenience store and then you can run it yourself because you got to depend, not that it was bad, he was saying, but on a grocery store, it don't run with two or three people.
Right.
And he knew that. And he didn't even have a deli. I mean, at the time, he didn't have a deli. So he knew that store takes multiple people to make run.
Yeah.
And he thought, he's like, in his mind, the convenience store, because he'd been in other businesses. He had the store for, I don't know the exact years. My dad could tell you the date, the time, and everything,
Sure.
when and where, But I knew it's quite a few years Joe had the grocery store. Before that, he had like the bar and the bowling alley or something like that. He was in other businesses. So
Mm-hmm.
his thought was a convenience store might be, a better option. And honestly, the one in town was shut down too at one time, but I didn't know how to quite get the right people to do that. So we went
Mm-hmm.
on with the grocery store, but I did ask him, about suppliers, and he told me at the time that they were in it. This is what who they used, but some of those are gone, and so yeah, that was kind of a baby step into it.
Yeah. That's
But
such a
And it
good
was about
idea to.
summertime. So I could use a lot of my time at home then, calling different places. And so I spent a lot of that summer just calling. We used the Small Business Administration out of Wichita State, and I took some
Mm,
classes to see like if what type of business we should open, if corporation versus an LLC, and they looked over a business plan, tried to see how much money it was going to cost, like ballpark it, how much money do we think that we're going to need.
mm-hmm.
Then that got scary. Financing was scary, but
Absolutely. Yeah. But using those resources, calling somebody that you know from that industry, using the SBA, like, they are there to help you. Whatever you need, they will hook you up with the resources that you need. And so this is one of the themes through the podcast, through the stories, is to paint this picture of like, you really don't have to know everything. You don't have to know, should it be an S Corp or a C Corp? Like, there are people who can advise you on these things. You just need the passion and the willingness to learn. And it can be a lot. And the numbers can start to look really scary when they get looking so big like that. Once you get a sense of like truly what you're signing up for, like the number, the millions of dollars, I'm guessing, was what was needed to get it up and going. Um, how do you then decide that, yes, we are going to sign these papers? We're gonna take on the debt or whatever it is, or however you made that work. Like, how do you decide to bite off something that big?
Go ahead.
we were we were lucky though that in our family we had a lot of resources. So his brother was in construction. So the boys, that's your story, but the boys built on the weekend. And so we had a lot of free labor in that regard. My
Mm,
cousin is an electrician. My uncle is a plumber. We used a lot of resources that way where they would come in and we would maybe pay them by the hour to do things, but they didn't bid it like a project. And so if they had help coming in and I needed to lay all the rebar in, I don't have to do it myself and hire my own crew. We've got enough people in our family that'll come in and help. They just needed to be bossed around in a sense and told what to do. So
mm-hmm.
we saved a ton of money and labor because of our family. And
Yeah.
that's your story, really.
Yeah.
So you want to
I
talk about your
mean,
brothers?
each one, like she said, was kind of the boss. So my brother Wes, he was probably the only reason we built it ourselves because he was just getting into construction, I guess. I mean, he is like 5 years younger than me, so that would put him pretty young. But he went to work right out of school for a guy that built houses. So he was used to building houses. We built a metal building out of, so it was a little different, but yet the same.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got on the inside, we still built wood walls and things. So
Yeah.
we needed him to be our boss pretty much. And I have an older brother and another younger brother that were there all the time too. And we just did whatever Wes told us. So same with like she was saying on the electrician, he didn't bring his crew. We were there. If how fast we dug or how fast we could listen or do it, the least amount we had. And he did give us a family discount per hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he gave me a lot of grief about not grief. Crap, I said I was thinking of a word, but about like I don't know how to say this because he used different words, but how can you
Take this big of a gamble.
yeah
That's what
and
Like,
I'm asking. Like, how do you get your stomach back in your stomach to like actually move forward and like
we don't.
do
and
it?
that's
Because
exactly what he said. Exactly what he said. He just kept on me, and every time he's like, "Ah, you're," and I'm like, "Shut up! I know I don't want to think about that part of it. Let's just plumb or whatever we were doing at the time."
would you say it's like a mixture of hope and like a self-confidence that's kind of like whatever comes up, I'm gonna do it. I'm not afraid of hard work. Like I'll just
Yeah,
do it, whatever that
And
means.
and our budget, we did something that's not really recommended in the business world, but we set our budget. We had already paid off our house because we lived moderately. We had already paid off our vehicles. So at that time in our life, we had no loans because that was our goal young, no loans. And then we could save and eventually maybe buy land where we wanted to. But that was our goal. So we had already made those goals earlier in our life. So we were sitting debt free. So when we took out the loan and everything, the big chunk of what we had, we wanted to make sure we could pay. So we knew that with what he was making and what I was making, we could pay this much loan if the store closed its doors today. Because he always said bankruptcy is not an option. So we have to finance it, whereas we may work the rest of our life to pay on a building that we're not using as the grocery store anymore. But if we sold at a cheaper rate, if we had to close and sell out the groceries cheap, we kind of knew we had this much money that would be discounted that we'd pay off towards our loan, and then how much would we need so that we wouldn't bankrupt ourselves too. So that's kind of what we did. And we didn't take a payment from the store for years. I mean, we never took a paycheck. I mean, to go through because we wanted to turn it over on our loan and turn it over on putting more inventory in. And every night when we'd lay in bed together, every night I would say,
there we
"Are
go.
we going to make it? Clint, are we going to make it?"
I'm like, please quit asking me because the first month was not a good month. I mean, the first month we had to get some more money because our electric bill was $5,000.
Right.
So
Right.
we are like, oh goodness. And then, so obviously, but by staying at Cessna, for me, I did exactly what they say not to do too. I took my money that I was making at Cessna and putting it in towards the loan or towards the store. And we
Mhm.
could live off of what she was making at school for our everyday living.
But we lived real modestly. I remember I stood in front of our closet and he's like, "All right, what do we have to have for the next 2 years?" And I'm like, "Well, you get holes in your shirt from welding. So you're going to need so many of these cheaper shirts. So you're probably going to need 10 welding shirts in 2 years." And he said, "I think you have enough clothes," which I didn't have a ton, but I had plenty for my school wardrobe. And I remember almost begging, like, in 2 years, my black shoes are not going to make it 2 years. So please, can I have just a pair of shoes in a year or in 2 years? And he said yes. And then of course the kids are always at the top of the list. What would they have to have a pair of shoes to go to school. They have to have, their clothes to go to school. But how much do they have to have as a need? And then where's that want line? And so
Mm,
we were as poor could be in that regard. Like we were on a very strict and dedicated budget, and we
yeah.
didn't. I didn't. Sometimes it's nice to buy you a new shirt or a new pair of pants, or I'm going to go to school and I'm going to have a Kansas Day, so I'm going to make sure I have some yellow, to represent Kansas or something. But it was a solid commitment. He gets his welding shirts, or maybe his couple pairs of jeans he needs, or whatever. I can buy one pair of shoes, and the kids get so much, and then that's it because our budget was set on this is how we're going to make it. So we had true sacrifice. I mean, the kids ate and we could eat, don't get me wrong,
Sure.
but it was true sacrifice. Our vacations were going to the park or going with me to the swimming pool in the summer, and we swam every day. And the food show, we go to
Food
the
show.
food show in Omaha, and that was their vacation because we actually got to spend the night in a hotel. And
Sure.
that was their vacation. But you ask them now, and they'll say those were one of their most fun times because as a
Yeah.
kid, when you're 7 or 8 years old and you get to eat all this food, and they were so good to the kids, it was a it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was sacrifice for sure, but it was
Well,
good.
and when you have such a clear goal and such a clear reason why, it probably doesn't feel a whole lot like sacrifice because you're getting so much. You're getting the whole grocery store, right? Like you're giving up a few things along the way, but you're also getting to live your dream. Like it's happening. It's a reality. This is what it
Mhm.
costs, right? True sacrifice in some areas, but also look at how much this is growing and blooming and whatever. So like you
And
had a
he's
manager. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
and he's happy. I mean,
Which
I
he's
mean,
happy.
that's worth
Yeah.
a lot. Which that probably, so you worked for 4 years, and then Jenny, how many years did you work after the store opened?
So the store was open a good 10 years before I decided to quit teaching. And the family was suffering. Like I felt like the kids were kind of second string sometimes. And I told them that was the agreement when we opened the store. Kids first, always. If that means I have to go home because the kids need to go home for homework or supper, I'm going home and you might have to stay by yourself. And that was the agreement. And so I told them, I said, something's got to give. I just don't feel like I'm being the best mom I can to the kids. And realistically, it was teaching that had to give, and I was okay with that. I'm fortunate enough I left education when I still felt I did a really good job and I wanted to still be there, and that's a blessing. It's a
Yeah,
blessing.
yeah,
Hmm.
to like leave on your own terms.
Yep.
That's beautiful. So Clint, when you stopped working at Cessna and then you were full time at the store, what did your role consist of?
well, it's kind of, I don't know, weird because so her mom managed our store while we weren't there, while we weren't there. So, granted, I would get every break I had at Cessna, lunchtime, I was on the phone normally to them at the store. They're asking me something constantly. Um, so I knew what was going on this at the store a bit during the day. I mean, because I didn't show up until about 4:05 at the store, and then I would be there until could be midnight. I mean, and then back to Cessna all over again. But when I first came, it was kind of weird because now I'm the owner, but I have this manager there, and I did have butchering things to do because they didn't do any butchering. That's what I did from the time my dad and I got off work, and we would go up there and we would butcher until we had enough meat to make it through till the next day. Um, so all the other roles, the vendors coming in, I wasn't used to that kind of stuff. So I was kind of just not learning, but learning, I guess learning.
Mhm.
So, and I wanted to know, hey, when does this guy come and that guy come, and just kind
Mhm.
of learn the business, what goes on during the day, because I haven't been there for 4 years. I mean,
Right.
she checked them in, and I mean, she did all that stuff at first, and then it kind of slowly, you know, I got to know everything, and yep. I mean, that's kind of how it worked out for me.
Did did your mom stay, Jenny, and keep managing the store, or Clint, did you eventually like become the manager and did she take a step back?
She finally decided to retire last year. So she worked 14 years. 14 of our 15 years she was there with us, which was really good. It's nice to have left the store and be able to trust that it was in good hands, because she would always make a decision that she felt was the best for the store. So it was a blessing that we could leave and trust someone to be there.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
exactly. That,
And if,
well, and like you said, it takes so many people to make it happen, and they're all handling different parts and pieces that, if they don't communicate well, like nothing about what's going on. So like you have to trust them. It's such a team sport. Grocery is such a team sport.
Hmm.
in the building part of it, my brother has a body shop in Conway, and my younger brother worked for him and still does. But he could come down, and like I'd have a truck, a semi coming while we were building the store, or even after. All I'd have to say is, hey, can you go unload this? And he would go down there because it took a skid loader or something besides the lift that we had at the store. So he would go down there a lot. He'd just like to pop in and check on it too. And so he came down a lot. Or if the doors, something happened to the doors while I was at Cessna working, and I couldn't just be there to help them, they could call him or my uncles, but mainly they called my brother Brent because he was right there in town, and he could be down there in like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So a lot of that was another team, kind of a helpful deal that went on through the process.
Yeah. I think that's like one of the main things that grocery really taught me is how to receive help, because like there's just no possible way you can do it all by yourself. And so if you're not very good at delegating or receiving help from other people or them wanting to help you, like it's really uncomfortable. But yeah, you get over that real quick because there's just no human way that like one person's gonna do all the things. So um yeah, so where are we in this story then? So you built it, you ran it, um, came back, quit your jobs. Like, I feel like we could probably do like a whole nother conversation if we wanted to about like running the store and what that actually has been like.
I
And like,
think you should tell the parking lot story.
okay, let's hear the parking lot story.
Well, this is building the store, back it up.
Okay, okay,
Um, so we were going to build the parking lot. It was going to be concrete, 25 feet, because we figured, and we did measuring, got the longest pickup truck. I asked my brother, he's like, "Oh, you need at least 25 feet, maybe 30." So we thought, okay, we'll do 25 feet then, because that's all we could afford, honestly.
right.
So Jenny would feed the whole crew, whether it was us 4, 5, 6 people or 10, 15 people, depending on the day and what we were doing and how much help we needed. And I think one day we had about 35 people that I think she might have had to feed. I don't know if we fed them
That's
that day,
okay. That's
but
the least we could
anyway.
do.
So um, she was at home making lunch, and we went to framing up the concrete for the parking lot. And my uncle's there, and he's like, "Go all the way to the road." And I'm like, "No, we got to go 25 feet. That's all we can afford." And he's like, "Go all the way to the road. You're gonna regret it. Just go to the road." And I'm like, "We can't. We just can't." Um, so we went all the way to the road, and well, to the ditch. And Jenny shows up. So we have it all framed off, and
It's probably 4 times the size that we budgeted for.
at least maybe a little over. But it's a parking lot now.
And it's concrete. It's not cheap.
And and thank goodness we did it back then too, but for many reasons. But at the time, this is our budget. This is what we can afford. We don't know if we're going to make it. So we don't, we didn't, nobody knew. Some people thought we were crazy. I mean, so we went to the road, and she shows up to feed us. And I remember we had an old Explorer, and she popped the hatch and was going to get the food out. Well, she just stayed over there. So I was like, "Oh man, I don't want to go over there."
I'm
So I
sorry.
went, I went over there, and she does. We have kind of an agreement that if you're mad at me, we're going to get mad at each other. I mean, it just happens here and
Sure.
there. Don't do it in front of other people. I mean, that's just don't. So
I like that.
we were over by the under the hatch there, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" Acting kind of stupid. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "The concrete, it's all the way to the road." And I'm like, they said we need it to the road because we cannot afford it. I'm glad we can afford some concrete and no groceries to put on the shelf. That's pretty much exactly what she said. And I was like, well, I got peer pressured into it. And thank goodness
Come on, give me a break here.
it would have been major pain to try to add on to that concrete
Mm,
while we were open. And we have added on to it. I don't know, 10 years in, we did add clear to the road, kind of on an angle because people were having to curve in there and it was dirt on one side or rock, and it kept getting potholes and stuff. So, and
mm,
we were very fortunate at that time. We had his name's Fred Lang. He has a dirt moving company, and we'd get potholes. I mean, like major potholes, because people's coming down the road from the south, and they have to turn in and kind of almost make a U into our store, and it would get potholes. And his wife would shop at our store, and she'd tell Fred, you need to go fix it, because we couldn't fix it with the machines we had, even though we had skid loaders and all this stuff. He has the big dirt moving, like a rip. I call it's a maintainer that they do dirt country roads with, and
mhm.
it had rippers, and they could rip it up, and he'd roll it with his tires and get it back smooth again. And he did that and did that and did that, and never would take a payment, which was, we were very fortunate. And he says, we just, him and his wife both said, we want to see this store here. We're glad it's here. So I tried to give him like a ham or a couple turkeys or you name it during holidays or here and there. Do you need anything? And they were just really good to us. And then I went and finally, well, we put concrete in there. And he said, you took my job from me. I said, I know, I'm sorry, but
It's time. We appreciate your service.
Yep.
But the busiest time, because he's really good and patient and very laid back, which is good for my personality. And Sundays are always right after church is really a busy time. And I know when we first opened, I was sitting in the office doing something and he said, come here. And I said, what do you need? And he's like, come here. And he grabbed my hand and he walked me to the front of the store and he opened the sliding doors and we were looking at the parking lot and he said, see, I was right. Because the parking lot was filled at that time because so many people were there. And yeah, I had to eat crow that time and say, yep, you're right. You were right.
And that was your uncle who was like all the way to the road, all the way to he could see it. He's like, this is what needs to happen here. Yeah.
And he did tell you, if you can't afford it, I'll pay for it until you can afford it. So it wasn't like he was spending our money, and not, I mean, he said, because Clint would tell him, we that's not in our budget. We cannot afford that. Like we can't do it.
I can't get any more money. And that's when he said that. I was like, well, all right.
But he didn't tell me that at first, we just thought we would have no groceries at first, but it works. I mean, it's just things like that, just different people looking out for our best interest. And they knew more than we did. And we just had to accept that they knew what they were talking about. So,
yeah.
If we could have just seen the future, we would have done some more things different. Like Albert, the same guy, my uncle, told me in the back room, 20 more feet longer. You need to go 20 more feet. And I'm like, no, this building is humongous. Because when it was, just the shell, and it was huge, I thought. And then now we're cramped all the time. I mean, it's doable, but you have to, it's tight. But
yeah, gosh. But I love that many parts of that story. I love that don't get mad at me in public. That's a rule everyone should live by, If you care about your relationship, keep that behind private doors, But how you did take such a gamble and you were confident enough to do that, but then how like other people will show up and will fill in the gaps, they will support you, they will redo your drive for you over and over and over again because they want to see you succeed. Like I've felt that same thing, that like when you will take that risk and really go for it, like take a big swing. I mean, so many people will show up and be like, I really want you to succeed. How can I help? And it's like, you never asked for that. You never expected that. You weren't swinging because you thought they were going to do that. But other people want to help. They want to support. Like they're excited to get to redo the driveway because that helps the store. Like that's their part. Like he was sad to lose his job. Like he clearly enjoyed doing it. That's so freaking cool. I love that. And that is such a good note to end this conversation on, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. This flew by. I told you I would be absolutely enthralled in your stories, and I was. I thank you for sharing them with us. Anybody who was listening, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Like the podcast, like the video, all that stuff, all that support really helps put these episodes in front of more people who can potentially find some source of inspiration within them. So that is what we have for you this time. Until next time, do take such good care of yourselves, and so will we.